Hi everyone, welcome back to the Action Movie Show. Apparently we don't like Mondays anymore, or at least we don't when everything in the world conspires to make sure that we don't make it on Monday. How's it going, Manyninjas?
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. In everyone's defense here, on top of just generally one person being unavailable for a good bit, I've also been spending a good portion this week starting some online course stuff, which admittedly hasn't been the too long part of it, but I've also been working some general preparations for a convention this weekend, namely Anime North within the Greater Toronto area. So I've actually kind of had my hands tied too a bit, so it kind of been going all around.
Indeed. But we did manage to each watch the movie and have a good chance to take a look at it. And this week we are doing the 1997 movie directed by John Woo, starring John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, as I put in the little description there, and I'll be elaborating on it, trying to really out crazy one another. You've got these two guys who at this point were at their peak of their status on the crazy train, facing off against one another in Face Off. Um, Speaking for myself, just right off the top as the non-spoiler review, fantastic action movie. You've got these two guys pretty much at the peak of their powers. Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was really a great actor. He's still a decent actor at times, but it feels like a lot of it will depend on the material. When it comes to this one, they basically have an interesting thing where in order to make the movie work, concept-wise, they end up switching roles twice. They start off in one role, switch, and then end up switching again by the end of the movie. Um, so it's a bit of a challenge for both actors. They've got to go on two opposite ends of the spectrum to make it work, and I think they both do a pretty good job playing both sides of it. There are some very close similarities to certain characters they play, but we'll get to a lot of that. But for me, it was a fun movie to watch.
All right. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this regarding. I'd say honestly in this film, although it does carry a bit of both actors, we honestly I would have to say saw a lot more Nick Cage, or yeah, basically a lot more Nicolas Cage in this film than we did see John Travolta. And in terms of how Nicolas Cage films go, they tend to go one of two ways. It's either it's a really well thought out film that's like, pretty much really nice, as Carl's is examining a knife on his end for some reason or other, and
Just distracting you.
yeah,
Go on.
and if it's not a really well thought out film, then it's a one that he's doing clearly for the paycheck. This film is one where it was actually really well thought out. The action sequences in this film were actually really nicely set up there. Uh, Generally, a lot of the screen time I feel was dedicated to Nicolas Cage, and it was well spent. The sheer range that he was been given, or kind of leeway he was given for this film, is probably what spawned a bunch of blogs that deliberately cover all the many facial expressions of Nicolas Cage. And generally, I'm hard pressed to think of anything. Well, I guess I suppose, but I could find some things that are a bit off with this film. But it's generally a good film all around, and I would recommend it.
Absolutely, and I do think a lot of that also has to do with the direction. Like you do, Nicolas Cage really does kind of carry the scenes in terms of his ridiculous facial expressions and the various things he does. John Travolta does hold his own when he has to come out because he does have things that he does as well. And I would also say that um, I think a lot of it also was due to the direction. You've got John Woo directing it, so you've got these very elaborate, very dramatic action scenes um, because of John Woo's style. You've got these very elaborate long action sequences. And when you've got all these big long action sequences, they're very well choreographed, very well designed, very well thought out. So for me, I think that really added to the movie and made it a lot more fun.
Yeah, for the most part, what's the best way? I'm trying to think of this. I mentioned that Nicolas Cage's expressions are completely batshit crazy throughout most of this film. Uh, the way I kind of want to think about it best is even realistically, well, since at this point we have gone past the non-spoiler part, as previously mentioned, one of the big segments in this film, very introduced earlier on, is how you have to have the characters, basically the good guy and the bad guy, uh, Archer and Caster effectively have their faces taken off and interchange there. In order for Archer's character, who basically has Caster's face for the better part of the film, trying to go into prison in order to find out information about one last act of terrorism, which actually, surprisingly enough, that whole plot point gets nullified really early on in the film, or it might have felt like they might have actually wanted to stretch it out and kind of make it stretch it out for the course of the film on other kinds of movies of a similar style. But with that part being really diffused early on, then we go back to basically what happens when you have pretty much one type of personality, the original Caster, now pretty much dressed up as Archer for the most part and taking over his life, how he manages to take everything that Archer had established up to that point and basically kind of turn it on his head in his attempt to take over and make it all his, while you have Archer's character, who's in Caster's, basically Caster's body, for lack of a word, portrayed by Nicolas Cage, doing whatever he can in order to try to reclaim his original life, despite the fact that he has the one face no one from his original life wants to see. And the fact he has to basically rely on Caster's old contacts in order to try to make this whole thing work out.
No, absolutely, I'd agree with that. I think for me, because they do delve, when the way they do it, they almost go into like almost a science fiction thing. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to think, because in order to make it work, you have to believe that, number one, you can basically take off somebody's face entirely, graft it onto somebody else's face, attach it so that you can control all the motor functions and everything goes in there. And then on top of that, you go through very, very elaborate procedures to change the hairlines, because the guys had very different hairlines. And then on top of it, also to change kind of their body shape, because John Travolta and Nicolas Cage don't actually look that much alike. They look fairly different. And then, you've got to suspend disbelief in order to do it, because they really stretch. They do explain that, like, the one doctor goes through this elaborate length to explain exactly how they're going to make this happen. But you have to work within that whole idea in order to make it work, that all of a sudden John Travolta is now Nicolas Cage, Nicolas Cage is now John Travolta. That's the only way you're going to be able to make it work.
Did I mention crazy facial expressions? Because they really do apply here. I'm not sure you can tell, and I'm trying to impersonate the face up there.
Your eyes are not bulged out enough. Better?
My eyes feel dry now. Okay, that's better now. Anywho, generally, especially the way Caster's character is portrayed, both by Nicolas Cage and, well, technically by Nicolas Cage all along there, but as the original Caster portrayal by the Caster character himself, as well as Archer's attempt, due to basically being so intimately informed about Caster from trying to apprehend him all these years, for his literal impersonation for it, including the drug-fueled rant partway through the film, where talking about wanting to ruin the other guy's face, and where we get the perfect line, "No more drugs for that man." Is just generally, everything is so over the top with this character at times that it kind of makes it comedic there and worth watching just to see some of that stuff alone there. I'm going to be honest.
No more drugs for this man. Yeah, no, it's true that I think it's become almost a gimmick of Nicolas Cage. Now, I've had the chance to watch other Nicolas Cage movies, even some recent ones. If you ever have the chance to see it, it's not an action movie per se, but if you ever have a chance to see it, you should watch Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. So you get a chance to see something more recent where Nicolas Cage goes off the deep end. During this time, though, Nicolas Cage was actually on a bit of a run here. More recently, he's had the National Treasure movies and things like that, which have done well. For me, they don't, they're not really that interesting, but, they've been successful. But right around this time, so this movie came out in 97. So when you're looking at that, you have to take it in the context of this came out in 1997. And right around this time, Nicolas Cage was making Con Air. You had Leaving Las Vegas. You had Face Off, this movie. City of Angels, which actually was a pretty good movie. Snake Eyes, which was a fun movie as well. Gone in 60 Seconds, a personal favorite of mine. Um, you know,
Understatement.
absolutely. And you've got Wind Talkers, Adaptation, and Lord of War, again, one of my other personal favorites. So most of those first couple of movies I ran off only came within a couple of years of each other. So we've got from, and The Rock as well. So that's from 96 and through Snake Eyes in 98, Gone in 60 Seconds in 2000. So that's about a 4-year run right there, and a whole bunch of movies that were actually pretty solid. When we get to Lord of War is over in 2005. But then after that, it's a lot of not very good. Next, not very good. Ghost Rider, I don't like. Never have. Bangkok Dangerous, junk. Knowing, terrible. Just not very good. So taking the last couple of years in mind, Bad Lieutenant is actually pretty fun. And you do get, if you're into, as Manyninjas is, if you're into the many facial expressions and the craziness of Nicolas Cage when he does a drug-fueled rant, there you got a little bit of old school Nicolas Cage there in the Bad Lieutenant movie.
To explain why Gone in 60 Seconds is an understatement, every time Carlos would get a new electronic device, namely something like a Blu-ray player, his first test run would be to find his copy of that Blu-ray, put it in there, and probably put it to a particular scene where I believe it's at the car dealership, and where after a bit you have Nicolas Cage talking about pretty much too many bloody people with too much bloody money, something like that. But of course, if you want something that's a bit more deluxe, you're not it's self-indulgent wiener with too much bloody money. My correction. Come on. If you want to go for something really up there special, you're not a self-indulgent wiener. You're a connoisseur. And actually, speaking of Blu-ray things, there's something that it's probably they really didn't think this out too well when they were upgrading the general quality of these films from DVD and anything below that to Blu-ray, and the clarity there, especially during I think it was around a later part of the film, basically the final kind of chase scene. When I think off the top of my head, basically when they have a series of boat explosions going on there, and of course you have both of the titular characters getting propelled from an explosion on the boat that they just got sent flying from the crash there. The Blu-ray, unfortunately, is so high quality that you can blatantly see that the two individuals that go flying look nothing like John Travolta or Nicolas Cage. They're stunt doubles, but their faces are so clearly seen that it's like, yeah, you're not fooling anyone. These are not the guys that you're expecting here. They didn't even bother to edit. Let's try, speaking of face-offs and ripping off faces, but they really should have ripped off the scenes or some kind of editor and Photoshop at least some reasonable facsimile of the faces of the actors onto these stunt doubles from the footage, so it wouldn't look as ridiculous.
Well, I'll defend it. I'll defend that part in this way. Number one, Face Off was actually the first movie that I ever put on to a Blu-ray player, and that was one of the first things that I picked up on when the movie was, to the point that I paused it on that scene so that I could actually get a good look at it. I think two things. Number one, I'm pretty sure that in 1997 they didn't really think about, like, at 1997, high definition was not really a thought for anybody, and you weren't going to retroactively go in and CGI their faces out of it. What he's talking about is that as soon as during the big long boat chase right at the end of the movie, this is literally at the end of the movie. So the boat chase is happening, they're fighting back and forth on this boat. They're trying to take each other out, and finally the boat crashes. Boat crashes, and they both go flying from the boat. And then you've got the scene where you've got them flying, and you can see the guys going like this, falling over, and they're about to go. You fly. You move your arms and your legs. Somehow that'll either make you fly or cushion your fall. It's the standard reaction. You're moving your arms and your legs all over the place. So as you see the two people coming up and coming down, you can blatantly see they're stunt doubles. They're people hired to do it. But the two guys look nothing like the real actors. In fact, I think even if you did go back and CGI their faces in, they still wouldn't look right. because I'm pretty sure both actors, height-wise, don't even remotely match up the guys they're supposed to be portraying anyway. So physically, they don't look anything like what they're supposed to be. They were just two bodies that were flying in midair to land where they were supposed to land. But yeah, in the Blu-ray version, you can 100% see that it is not even close to the same two people that supposedly went flying off the boat. And to be honest, I think I'd leave it, just because to change it at that point, you're taking away from the original film. But I suppose there is an argument to be said that for some movies, now for me, you want the highest quality you can get on most movies. But realistically, for some movies, I don't feel like it lends itself to anything, and this will be a separate debate. I've always thought that one movie that I didn't think would actually benefit from the Blu-ray treatment would be something like a Jaws. I haven't had the chance. I bought for my dad one of the Blu-ray copies of Jaws. We haven't watched it. I am kind of curious to see it, just because I do want to see how the special effects in Jaws hold up to a Blu-ray transfer. I feel like it doesn't, given that you don't actually want, in a movie like that, you don't actually want to see the damn shark. The less you see the shark, the more effective the movie is anyway. So making it clearer that it's fake shark, I don't think actually adds anything to the movie. Similar in this way, having that scene in much clearer visual ability doesn't really help. In fact, you'd be better off having that almost entirely blurred out, because then you let your imagination kind of do it. If you can literally see the guys flying through the air and you see that it's somebody else, it takes you out of it a little bit if you're paying close attention to it. If you're just quickly observing it and you see the guys go up and fall down, then it doesn't matter.
But they could have honestly gone and asked the masters of editing things in and making changes, even changes that people don't want. The people over at LucasArts. They could have helped them on that sort of thing. But yeah, I would have to agree. Although, in this case, I could see where they could have... Honestly, it wouldn't have really changed too much in the film to edit in slightly closer-looking individuals, or at least the facial expression there. Yeah, there are some films that honestly wouldn't benefit too much from pretty much a higher quality filming, especially since it reveals things that honestly should not be present. The animatronic jaw shark, which I think, was it named Bruce? I think it was named Bruce.
I think Bruce is the name they went with. Yeah.
Bruce the shark. It was generally a hideously formed thing that barely functioned. They're probably just glad it didn't burst into flames during recording. Although the idea of a shark on fire in the water would have been actually pretty damn entertaining. Maybe they need to put something like that in Sharknado 2. I know they're working on that.
I don't think we should encourage anything involving Sharknado.
All I can tell you is it hasn't come out yet, but there's a company called Funko, which do a series of small, well, they call the general line Funko Pop, which is a series of small vinyl figurines, usually known for just the general base body, but oversized, kind of blocky heads in there with simplistic eyes. And they actually advertised not too long ago a Sharknado figure, which is basically the shark, a kind of a blocked out shark there, in at least it looked in the photo, a translucent tornado thing. And once that thing comes out, you know I'm picking one up.
You know what my response is to that?
What?
I want you to look at the picture of Nicolas Cage you have on the screen. That's my response to that.
I don't know. I believe that was the response after grabbing someone's ass, which is something that was a reoccurring theme throughout this film.
Listen, the context of it does not change the fact that the facial expression in this case is accurate. And he was a hilariously insane priest.
Yeah. I believe... I'm trying to think of what the comparison was. It's basically the wolf hidden among the sheep, or something like that. I've heard people describe exactly how the imagery in this particular setup worked, which also ended up lending itself further when the facial change came up, and he basically took over Archer's life. And once again, you have the wolf as Castor Pollux, among the sheep being the general populace and everything else, which is supposed to be stopping people like him.
Castor Troy. Castor Troy.
It was Castor Troy?
Yeah, I think you're mixing.
No, Pollux. There's another planet.
Pollux Troy.
Yeah, okay. That's why I'm getting Pollux in there. Okay, Castor Troy, disguised as Archer, pretty much taking over there and disguising himself and hiding everything that Archer had established there, until eventually his actions reveal that there's something is amiss and Archer is not quite alright. And generally all the fun like that.
Absolutely, it's true. You know what though? Let's talk about this. In terms of plot, it's fairly straightforward. You know, the two characters exchange places during an experimental surgical procedure that gets you to remove faces. They end up exchanging. They end up looking like each other. They end up impersonating each other. Archer takes over Castor Troy's life indirectly, associates with his associates, and then Castor Troy takes over Archer's life, living with his family, being an FBI. Going on a series of raids and things. Because he has all this inside information, he's able to find everything, and he kind of turns himself into a hero and slowly starts to position himself to move up the chain, up the FBI, which for him he realizes would be beneficial because then he has access to all this power, which for what he wants to do for himself, you know what, it works out really well. But I do want to talk about this because, like I said, the plot point is simple enough. It's not complicated. One of the things that I think made this movie really interesting was the two actors being really good at what they were trying to do, but also John Woo's style coming into this. Really elaborate, impressive fight sequences, gunplay sequences. I particularly liked the one where they raided one of Castor Troy's friends with a whole SWAT team and several SWAT teams in this whole big FBI group. And they ended up having this extended gunfight. And they juxtaposed it with the little kid listening to, like, the Disney song, the Somewhere Over the Rainbow song. Like, I don't know if it was a cover of it or if it was the original. I really don't know. But having that juxtaposed with the slow motion slaughtering of people as they're getting shot left, right, and center, while the kid is listening to this and seeing it, but also listening to the song that's still playing in the headphones that he's wearing.
I believe they were implying beautiful chaos there, especially with how everything was pretty much done in slow motion, as you were suggesting there, and basically you could see people getting shot up and torn apart. Well, you have a generally peaceful song playing in the background for all this, and it's like, this is an interesting juxtaposition here. One that is disconcerting here and kind of a disconnect, but that's what makes it work.
I just thought it was fantastically entertaining. I just enjoyed having that contrast. They're basically, you know, that kid's gonna grow up to be warped in the head. In addition to who his parents were, witnessing that kid's gonna show up all kinds of messed up, and I look greatly forward to reading the notes of the psychologist for this child as he grows through his adolescence.
The child, which conveniently enough looks a hell of a lot like the kid that was originally killed at the start of the film, I might add there.
Probably not a coincidence.
No, fully intentional there. That's with the way it's been directed there. It's highly intentional, which of course it makes sense of why at the end of the film, because effectively everyone else is dead related to the original kid's family there. Archer's character ends up adopting basically the replacement for the son he lost into his own family to raise there with his family. And to be honest, probably the last immediate point I can think of that I want to bring up is not something from the direct film itself, but actually something from one of the extra deleted scenes that they had an alternate ending. I'm not sure if you watched that part of it. Where basically they had at the end there, as you tried to distract me by putting a flashlight on that side, on your end of the camera there, what they had there is, apparently at the very end of everything, they basically, even the director comments is like, yeah, we were tried for this version of the ending to effectively pull off an Alfred Hitchcock, where you have Archer's character and his wife pretty much near the bedroom. Archer's just in the restroom directly connected to washing his face. And when they pan up, everyone looks a bit shocked and appalled, as the reflection is not Archer's character, but Castor. They look away and then look back, and then it's back to Archer's own normal reflection there, to which everyone seems to call out a bit. Both the couple embraces there, and you see a sly smirk appear on Archer's face, which leaves the open-ended question. Okay, we saw them both leaving originally in the or in the ambulance, but the question is, did we actually get Archer back as Archer, or was there one last slip-up and Castor managed to make one last pretty much escape there? And it's actually Castor again. Who is this person really? They left it open-ended there. And of course, the director commented later that pretty much the way this didn't test well because you effectively threw away everything else that's going up to this point with this kind of abrupt thing. If it were handled more in a kind of an Alfred Hitchcock sort of way throughout the whole film, this might have worked. But here it's like, okay, we don't know if the good guy or bad guy won, and we didn't set it up in such a way that we could embrace this ambiguity. So I basically threw away all the rest of the film ahead of time, or after that point. So they decided to go with a more neutral ending, where it makes it clear, yes, the person we're dealing with is the actual Archer, and everything ends happily ever after.
Yeah, no, I think the way the film was shot, I don't think you could have used the. I think I've had the chance to see that alternate ending once before. The thing is, I don't think you could have done it the way they shot it. They shot it too basic. They shot it too much to the point. Is pretty. The ending they ended up with was very basic. I've only seen one or two times where you were able to shoot a very different type of ending and make it really work. For me, I think the one that I remember most clearly for me, and there's been others, but the one that comes to mind the most right off the bat was Payback, Mel Gibson movie, where they shot it in such a way. The director had one vision. They went and they looked at it, and it didn't test very well either. They didn't like it, so they ended up changing the ending very much completely. Whereas in one, the main character dies, and in the other one, it's very clear they live. But they didn't just change the ending in order to do that. They literally had to go back and get more actors and reshoot entire sections of the movie in order to completely change the narrative and get you to the different result. You couldn't do that with just like changing one scene. It wouldn't have worked. You had to reshoot several scenes and introduce other characters that weren't really there in the original cut in order to make it work. And the theatrical version, I felt like it was a better version. But some people prefer the original director's version. But reality is you've got access to both if you really so desire. But I think in this case, doing it where you just reshoot basically one scene, it wouldn't really. I don't think it really would have worked that way.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that in this case, the alternate ending, as I described that, it was an interesting attempt, but very poor execution, and there was not enough in the film up to that point in order to help justify and sell that kind of ending. It would just have been like, this is kind of a crap cop out here. It's like, okay, is this the right person? Is this the wrong person? At this point, it's like everything, you left it so ambiguous that it's like, even if it comes out there, are you realistically going to do anything else with this franchise as a franchise? Probably no, so it's kind of stupid to end at that point. Unless you realistically think you're going to be doing something with this thing later, it just put a proper conclusion there. And it just, nothing like this, kind of one of those alternate end deals, which it seems to be quite a few films we've done up to this point have kind of had some sort of an alternate ending, which either leaves things much more ambiguity, or I can't even talk right now. It leaves more ambiguity as to how the eventual fates of all people involved end up at that point, or just generally kind of really poorly executed, or poorly tested to the point that they have to go back as like, okay, we're going to change this thing out. Because obviously, in terms of films you've already done, First Blood is the most immediate one I can think of, or the more recent one I can think, where the obvious ending is basically a franchise killer, and then John Rambo died. Basically, he took his own, or had his own life taken at that one. Conan, for another one, the first ending, or one of the alternate endings, basically ended with Conan basically just kind of pondering upon the steps of the giant kind of temple set up there. I can't even remember the guy's name right now. I'm drawing a complete blank. but basically left it very ambiguous as to what his alternate fate was, leaving the question of was the sorcerer actually right along with him gone? What point does Conan have at that point? Which, of course, they added on to, and I know there's at least one other film that had kind of an extra ending or an alternate ending there, which kind of changed the whole, or changed what was the whole point getting up to that ending. But I just can't remember what that one is off the top of my head.
Well, let me take a look here. I can kind of see. I'll just stay on you for a minute while I'm taking a quick peek here. Let me look back, and I'll kind of try to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I'm drawing a blank right now. Conan and the Rambo, I think, where they one immediately come to mind.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm looking at it, like, Commando, I think, was just straightforward. I think it was just one ending. Missing in Action, you probably could have had an alternate ending for him, but I don't think you did. Master of the Flying Guillotine, Paycheck, RoboCop, Dragon Eyes, Ninja Terminator.
I think maybe Paycheck, but I don't remember off the top of my head. At least I recall...
Paycheck is one that you could think could have an alternate ending.
I'm not sure they included it on there, but I recall hearing about it, so maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. Anyway, okay. That's enough of it. We kind of went on a tangent there from the actual this week's film itself, so I suppose we should probably get back to that.
Absolutely.
Well, realistically, you got anything else you want to add on there?
Well, I think for me, I think for the most part, like I said, this film is interesting in the sense that it's actually a really good movie, really fun to watch, but it's straightforward. The only thing I was really looking at is that I was looking at the different action sequences, because we talked about the one where they juxtaposed it with the music. That was really cool. I thought it was a great looking sequence. But you had a couple of different sequences where John Travolta and Nicolas Cage were fighting each other, having like these extended gunfights. And you also had the one where Castro was captured originally, where they have this extended gunfight, airplane crashes into a hangar, they have an extended gunfight, and then he ends up getting captured or thought to be killed in a coma, technically, because he fired off a jet engine, knocking him through a tube into the back of this other section, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to do it.
Although, ironically, that does remind me, not for that particular bit, but for one of the FBI raids, just right after the whole orchestrated chaos with the interesting musical segment there. Eventually, it leads into kind of a room full of mirrors at some point, and after enough mirrors get shot up, you have a point where you have both of the men pretty much on one side of a double-sided mirror, or at least a wall with two mirrors on both sides, reflecting themselves. So they eventually end up having basically a Mexican standoff where they're pointing at their own reflection, knowing what's on the other side is the other guy. So although they're pointing at themselves, they're pointing at the other man. And that's when they start opening fire and barely dodging each other, which they effectively both shoot each other where the head should be. What they're really, technically, if you're looking by the mirror point, they're shooting at their own heads and basically committing suicide with the way the visual is set up there for both of them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Basically, like this a lot of this is due to like the John Woo style that he likes to do. There were a lot of scenes that almost had like a double meaning, and it was really well thought out, and it ended up being a very interesting action sequence. Even something as simple as the boat chase, which became the boat battle, and then we had the scene where we made fun of the stunt doubles falling over. You did have this extended scene where we have them chasing each other in boats, fighting all the way through to the end, having the boat crash, having them fly off the boat, and then have another final fight back on shore after they had just been fighting on these boats. Like, it was a very long, elaborate, but very interesting sequence. And there were a bunch of sequences like this throughout the movie.
Pretty much, I think, in terms of commentary, I'm admittedly kind of run out of this end, so if you don't mind, I'll just go to kind of my final synopsis here, or just general review. Mostly, as everything you pointed out there, there are a few quirks here or there, and of course the funniness of the stunt double there, and just the ridiculous facial expressions. My takeaway from some of the seriousness of the film, generally, this is actually a really well-handled film John Woo did an excellent job. The actors, that pretty much your head actors, uh, did an excellent job in their various roles and their alternating roles as the film goes on, and of course the final switcheroo back. Action sequences you can't complain about. With all the stuff there, they're pretty plentiful, and when they come in there, they're pretty much very flashy, but there's still enough substance to them where there's entertainment value here. It's something that's pretty much, this is something which people should realistically try to emulate in their own work later on, and it doesn't feel kitschy or anything. So if you happen to be able to find a copy of this thing on Blu-ray, go ahead and pick it up. If you happen to see it on Netflix, in this case it wasn't on there when we were looking, feel free to watch it. It's worth the watch. It's a good investment of time. If you happen to come across it at a discount for any reason, yes, pick it up. There's no excuse not to. It's actually a really great film.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think it's pretty much on discount all the time now because it is one of the older Blu-rays. Even though it was a good transfer, it actually looks pretty good. Overall, it's just a great movie. Great fun to watch. Really good action. Like, if you love the action, you've got great gunfights. You've got great battles. You've got Nicolas Cage and John Travolta both playing crazy very well. John Travolta, like, I did mention that there were some other movies that I felt had certain similarities just in the character that we're talking about. And I felt like when John Travolta was playing Nicolas Cage's character and being Castor Troy and being crazy, I felt that the crazy that he went for was very much like his own character in another John Woo movie. It felt a lot like Broken Arrow, where he basically played a character that had a purpose and was almost maniacal in the way he approached it, and really he seemed to be almost giddy and reveling in his own insanity. And I think that's basically what they went for that, and it made it a lot of fun to watch. So yeah, I would say fantastic movie, definite buy, definite watch, no doubt, as you should. Are you going to keep posing with your little weapon there, Manyninjas?
I'm just checking some stuff out. I have to make sure everything's ready for when I need to use this thing. There'll be much savageness, and there'll be much fun. Steady, so great. Really great. Yeah. I'm not sure if the mic picked up on that. But yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so that would be our conclusion to that, for sure. So I think that covers this movie for this week. What I will say, we'll do some shameless plugging. Before we do, though, I believe, let's see, where the heck did I put it? Do you happen to recall offhand what next week's movie was? We did discuss this, and now I have to think about it.
No, not at all. I don't remember what. I know we made up a list, and one of us hypothetically wrote it down, I hope.
Oh, I wrote it down for sure. It's just
I don't have it written down on my end. So I guess while Carlos is looking for it, I'll go for my plugs. Although unfortunately my plugs are a bit on the light side. Yes, as I mentioned, I've been spending the
shamelessly plug for a few moments. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I've been spending a good chunk of this week preparing for the Anime North 2014 event that's going to be going on this weekend within the GTA area. So hypothetically, I'll be putting on some footage, or at least some pictures and setting some stuff over the next little week, or the next week upcoming after the event. So, of course, on Twitter, I am at Manyninjas on Twitter for my Twitter account. My website would be iamManyninjas.com, where it's the easiest way to find my links to my various videos and updates from my YouTube channel. In terms of the YouTube channel, it won't be so much this week. This rest of this week is a bit of a write-off because of obviously I'm not going to be here for a few days due to the event stuff. But there'll be more continuing content coming back right after the event is done, hopefully including some stuff from the event in question. And any luck, Carlos?
Yes, well, success. I will say that the next movie that we're doing is American Ninja.
Yeah, I forgot it was one of the martial arts weeks.
Yes, absolutely. It will be, just so I can cover it, might as well. The next few weeks will be American Ninja next week, followed by War, Jason Statham and Jet Li. And then for our 20th episode, since I like to do something a little special every 10
I might
episodes.
suggest, I'm not sure what's on the other side of the page there, but you might not want to show that on camera. I'm not sure what you got there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the last thing on here is Bloodsport. Will be the 20th. Will be the 20th movie that we'll cover. And the I like to do a special one every 10 episodes or so. So Bloodsport will be the 20th. Jean-Claude Van Damme's probably his most famous movie. Should be pretty enjoyable. And it does give us an excuse to talk about a few other things because there may be one or two characters in there that you have a personal affiliation with that you happen to particularly enjoy. And you can fill us in a little bit more about that when we get there.
Spoilers.
So,
it's Chong Li.
Yep. And then speaking of which, another opportunity to talk about facial expressions, since you do happen to be quite a fan of them. Well, he has quite a few in this movie that we'll definitely be talking about without a doubt.
Yep, pretty much. Most importantly, Chong Li. Chong Li, Chong Li, Chong Li, Chong Li. This would make so much work better if I had an audience back here. We'll have to get that into the quote for that week's videos. We need to get me an audience back here to join me in the chanting.
We'll work on getting that CGI'd in. So in the meantime, that'll cover that. For myself, it's carlosalcazar.org, at carlosalcazar2. That's the various places where you can see what's happening and what's going on. Updates will be forthcoming there. That's where we'll keep all the information up to date. So that covers. Now we know what's coming up. We've done our shameless plugging. We are good. Definitely, like, subscribe, leave us a comment to let us know how you feel about different things. We do take the information into account, so we try to learn from it and get, add the little things here and there as we go along. And definitely, if you get a chance, go back and watch some of the old episodes. I was very amused to find Manyninjas. Before we go, let me ask you this: what do you think has been the most watched video in our action movie show thus far?
To be honest, I'm not sure what it is, since until more recent times, I haven't actually even been able to see the view count on my end. But
I don't know if you can even see the view count on it now. I think it's just the way YouTube does these videos, where I don't think it lets you see it publicly, the view count.
Yeah, but mostly because since we do it through Google Hangouts and then later it gets kind of transferred over to YouTube, that's probably the case. But off the top of my head, just out of spite, I'm pretty sure it's a Steven Seagal film.
You are close, but that is not the one.
Then it's a Chuck Norris one.
Again, you are close, but it is also not the one.
All right, then I'm surprised. What is it?
The most watched one that we have in the time that we've been doing this is actually Dragon Eyes.
I don't even understand that one. It was promised as a Jean-Claude Van Damme film, but then he only shows up as like, yeah, I'm just here as a cameo. And I'm not even going to do the splits once during my stay here. They didn't pay me enough for that. GoDaddy paid me enough to do the splits. And then they played the harp that shoots fire, and say in a creepy fashion, it's go time. But no. Dragon Eyes? We don't get any of that stuff. We get philosophy. And me pretty much punching a guy that's honestly an MMA fighter, and King is like, yeah, this isn't so much of a hard sell there that the other guy looks like he can fight because he can actually fight there. And it's like, it's okay, it's nice, but it's go time.
And yet it is the most watched one that we have ever done. It beats Under Siege by about 10%. It's actually about 10% more views than Under Siege, which actually did pretty well, all things considered, to be perfectly honest. Now, one more thing. Which one, to my disappointment, is the least viewed one of the episodes?
I would say the most disappointing, I'm not sure because it might have been earlier on there, is probably Commando, I would guess. As strange as that might sound.
Die Hard.
Die Hard? I guess people aren't in the spirit of Christmas.
That's what I'm saying. You know, in terms of Christmas movies, we did talk about Cobra being in the top two. But if we use Christmas movies that we've covered, Cobra right now stands at number one over Die Hard. People.
That's disappointing, actually.
It is very disappointing. People.
It's not like Cobra is a bad film, because it's not. It's entertaining, but in terms of, I would easily say that Die Hard is a better film than Cobra. Let's be honest here, ladies and gentlemen.
Die Hard is probably the best movie we've covered. Top to bottom, it is probably the best movie we've covered. In terms of everything. Plot, your villain, the actual thing. I found that to be very ironic.
Plot and everything, yes. In terms of the best film overall, that's subjective. I would still lean towards Schwarzenegger films for that, but that's just, I just really like Schwarzenegger stuff personally, so that might be personal taste kind of kicking in there.
What? All right, we're not going to get into this right now. This is a separate video, and I'm going to have this man explain himself how exactly he comes to that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we do appreciate you watching. This has been the Action Movie Show. Do us a big favor, as I said, like, subscribe, make comments, give your own thoughts on which one of the movies we've covered you think is the best one. That'd be great. That'd be a great thing to include. But also at the same time, watch the damn Die Hard. I am saddened in life when Die Hard has more hits on it than Cobra. As much as I like
Cobra has more hits than Die Hard, you mean? You got it backwards, I think.
Okay, switch that in reverse. I am saddened that Die Hard does not have more hits than Cobra. There.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for watching. As Carlos mentioned, like, subscribe, watch the Die Hard video, please. If you're asking yourself, why shouldn't I watch a Die Hard thing? Why don't I watch it later? No, you're not watching it later. You see this time? I want you to look at the time, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you can't see the time. I'm pointing towards the time on my clock, on my melting Dali clock over there. And you know what time it says, ladies and gentlemen? It's go time.
That's right.
Later.
Don't make him point that sharp thing at you again. We will see you again next time. Have a great night.
Take it easy, ladies and gentlemen.